Hi, welcome to the Self-Generated Podcast. This is Steve. We were talking about some of the complexities in the way I framework or the frameworks that I look at that explain consciousness and who I am and what I am. And for example, talked about those pit of the stomach feelings, those anxieties, those trepidations, those things that I couldn't get over without drinking. And I thought of them as physical experiences, but the reality of it is it's a perception. It was an experience that's, yes, I assign as a physical thing. But the reality of it is just like somebody who had lost their leg and they experienced phantom limb. It's because that experience of the limb is not just in the limb. Experience is actually in the head in no small part in the way we model our perceptions, coming from the signals coming from our body. And that there is something to my body, that it's not just a machine, that it's not just separate from me, and that I was treating my body throughout most of my alcoholic adulthood like a rental car, like dog shit. And in some parts, it was because of my poverty, or at least I recall one moment of going weeks where I couldn't afford to get a tooth removed, an impacted molar, and my treatment or my ability to go to sleep or try to handle the pain was alcohol. And that was not an excuse, but it was definitely a contributing factor in my early adulthood to my my alcoholism at whole. And that wasn't entirely my fault as much as anybody would want to go, well, you're an adult, it is on you. But I wasn't taught. I didn't understand. I didn't have insurance. These things didn't make sense to me. And I just simply wasn't able to afford the removal until after several weeks. And I had to work. So I worked buzzed. I did all these things in my early 20s. And why I'm talking about that now, though, is that another aspect is the extended mind, not just in body cognition, that my body, but the extended mind, the outside world, the world I live in, is also intrinsic to my experience. If I had grown up in a different household or a different family, or had a doctor or a friend, or had had money, or any number of things, that would have not been one of the contributing factors to me. There's a lot of different things that ended up changing my story, and not to take take away ownership from my own experience, but to look at and realize that I am in part a product of my environment, and not just acting out prior memories or anything like that. In no uncertain terms, because our environment has a direct reflection on our psychology and our life and our sense of self and safety and well-being. And since we're creatures of active inference and we create models and these interpretations and we predict the world based off of how we experience it, how the outside world is to us, how it's presented to us, how we learn about it, what education is, all of these things have a whole lot more meaning and different meaning than we take them for right now. Our technology, we think of it as just a cool thing, but in reality, if our technology and how we interface with the world affects our actual psychology and sense of self, then that does help make sense of why we're having so many issues with people. And we talk when it comes to the amount of screen time they have, the sociability. We see a downgrading of young people's ability to be sociable and interact in the ways that we traditionally think. Well, it's because we don't think that humans work in the way that I'm discussing. We think that they are just going to hatch at some fucking point as they turn into an adult, somewhere between 16 and 21. Some switch is flipped. It's nonsense that we create models and interpretations of our world. And so if you grow up staring at a screen, you are not going to know how to deal with the real world in the same way as somebody who interacted with in the real world. And you can't just unlearn all those things that you should have learned. And that is part of our psychology now. We don't acknowledge that because we don't acknowledge us as creatures of active inference, embodied cognition, and the extended mind. And we don't realize, we think of the outside world as like, oh, just something you have to overcome. That's why when we put somebody in solitary confinement, we think we're going to punish them until they learn, versus realize that we're literally making monsters. When you put somebody in solitary confinement for a long period of time, many places in the world, it's considered inhumane punishment because it affects people's psychology. But we don't live in a world where we acknowledge that. Or at least if you live in the United States, when it comes to solitary, they don't acknowledge that. Because we don't acknowledge how we actually work. And that's the freeing part for me of understanding these ideas, these frameworks, is more than just academic ideas for publish in paper and review, that if these things are true, then these are game changing ways in which we can look at how we live our lives, how we build the systems that run our lives, and what that actually means. It was empowering for me. It can be empowering for you. But the trick of it all is that these complex ideas need to be taken in. You don't have to understand them to the point in which you can write a paper about them, but you have to experience them in a way where they do not give you dread or fear. That is the lessons that we're learning, is how to experience perspectives alternate to what you believe to be true, be able to handle them, process them, think about them, review them, judge them, evaluate them outside of that physical anxious sensation, outside of the worlds and things that we do to avoid this type of thinking. Because when you think about it, think of all of the things you try to avoid. Typically what they are is we label them as counter to how we predict the world should be, that they're crazy. In politics, if you're left or right, the other is crazy. The other is scam artists. How can half of the country believe that elections were stolen and we keep moving forward as if nothing happened? But people fundamentally believe it was stolen. And that you can call either side, all the evil names you want. But if either one were true, it would be game changing, like stop the presses, everything needs to change. But it isn't. It's farcical. It's ridiculous. But it continues to move forward because we act as though it's true. We're not able to pause and take a real strong, hard look at all of the systems and how things work, because as they're working, we're just not built to do that because we don't understand. The systems are actually built to continue to perpetuate, to move forward without looking, without stopping, with looking down on those that do. And that's what we're going to try over time to do with this podcast and explore. We're going to have spaces on X, meaning conversational times when if you feel like it, you can jump on. We can help hash out these ideas. And as collectively we figure out better ways to explain and explore them, we will. But first and foremost, you have to be willing to take a look and see, hey, you know what? Maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something more to what it is to be me, and that understanding what my emotions are, these actual physical sensations are, what these things actually are, is empowering. To take away the notion that all of my senses are direct reflections of reality and not be scared by it. If we're scared by it, it's not because it's truly terrifying, it's because it's counter to what you believe to be true. Now, think about this. If something is counter to what you believe to be true, but it's not good for you, what's going to happen? Go on, I'll wait. Think about it. What's going to happen? You're not going to change. Like alcohol. For me, it wasn't just as easy as assigning it as a negative thing. I had to totally fundamentally change how I related to it, how I related to the anxieties that were triggering to make me think about it, to want it, to crave it. I'm not cured. I'm not corrected. I experience the world differently. I put myself in different situations. I'm more capable because of all those things. There's no magic bullet, but I don't needlessly suffer trying to act out a story that that I never needed to play. I simply didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I was acting out a story. I was trying to play a role because I wasn't taught anything better. I didn't know. I didn't know what love was. I only knew of it from movies and TV shows. It wasn't until I was able to actually experience it that I fundamentally changed, and not in some magical way. Love is acceptance, acceptance of other people for who they are. Loving people because of imperfections, not in spite of them. Allowing things to be what they are, unequivocally. That's freedom. Not needing it to be something else so that you can feel at peace. That imprisons you. That imprisons you to systems. It's not necessary. It's not true. It's false superiority. You need to feel that you're superior to something else in order for that to actually be true. Most of the time, we can't judge that. Most of the time, you shouldn't judge that. What do you mean superior? Why? Superior in what way? It's nonsense. It's absurd. But it's how we work. So that's one of the biggest things that we have to explore through the extended mind is our outside world, how we relate to it, the systems that we live in, because that's how we model our world. That's how we judge to believe to be what is true. Our senses bring in information, visuals, sound. You're hearing me. We create understandings, models. When you think of understanding, when you think of recollection, and I get that, think of modeling. You're able to predict and understand and follow the patterns and nuances of that. That's what understanding is. It's modeling. You're able to take that in and create your own iterations of what's going on in the world and exist from that. Now, if you model an iteration of the world and think of it's supposed to be X, Y, or Z, and it's not, you're going to suffer needlessly. Others are going to suffer needlessly. That's why we have almost all of the suffering on this world right now. Because people will fight over patches of land when there's plenty of land elsewhere that they don't need to kill each other needlessly over, but because they believe inherently in their bones, as they would say, that they are right. But that's not that they're right. They've modeled themselves that way. We do that through oversimplification. And we do that not because that's not stupid. It's biological imperative. You use simple answers to err on the side of caution. We're being very capable of complex thought, but not innate to complex thought. We didn't exist for hundreds of thousands of years doing calculus and shit. We're able to do simple processes and steps. And then when you combine them, and then especially when you combine us together, is when you can get the most out of that. That's what made us us. You don't see that now because the worlds we live in now run on different iterations and different interpretations of what it means to be human. And that's where a lot of our suffering comes from. But we wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. So it's not to throw it all away. But if you understand it to a greater, finer, granular detail, you don't need to suffer through it. You can take command of it. And I'm telling you, in the times to come, with a lot of challenges that are going to come to the Western world, and this is again not doomsaying or freak out, but things are going to change because these systems that we have are not running well because they're running how I say. They're running on a story of what it is versus what it really is. And at some point, reality is going to reality. I'm not a huge Ayn Rand fan. She's kind of crazy, but she had a good quote where you can ignore reality all you want, but you cannot ignore the consequences of it. And I think we're coming to one of those times. But if you have any further questions, join us on X, SelfGen Podcast. Hope to hear from you soon. Steve out.